Hello once again, my friends. It's us, the voices in your headphones. Tonight we're going to be jumping on a trend far too late, but it's better late than never. Grab your jackets. It's going to get cold, because in this episode, we're exploring an iceberg. Despite all the iceberg videos around, I've yet to see one focusing on the Slenderman mythos, even with the massive expanding network that came from it. So I've decided to make my own and guide you guys through it. Admittedly, it's not the most fleshed out. Even as much as I loved the Slenderverse, I was very much part of the 2010s era before I fell off. We're touching on the real classic stuff. Most of the entries are going to touch on series from that era, and by no means is it going to cover every series ever made, because boy, were there a lot of those. Personally, I'm only going to be touching on the ones that I can speak confidently of. Don't want to go talking about things I know nothing about and all. So, take this as a mere entry into the Slenderverse, as opposed to a full exploration. After we dive together, you'll be on your own to explore. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll do just fine by yourself. Though, that's enough of my rambling. Let's start at the tip, where the skies are clear and the world seems so bright. Everybody should be familiar with these, but if they're not, they're the most easily accessible series to hop onto. We're beginning with
So Marble Hornets, most likely the most popular Slenderman media, starting out in 2019. The story of Marble Hornets follows Jay as our protagonist. One day Jay's old friend Alex gave him a ton of old tapes from his old film project, and true to form, Jay was given very clear, concise, and explicit instructions not to think about it and just burn them. This is exactly what Jay did not do, and instead he thought about it, kept them, and forgot about the tapes altogether. Now one day, Alex seems to go missing, and Jay remembers the tapes from the old project. He decides that he'll take a look through them and see if he can find anything that might give him a lead on where Alex might have gone. Instead, though, he found footage of Alex being stalked by a tall man who lacked a face. This ends up leading Jay into a long mystery full of twists, turns, and uneasy alliances. And if that wasn't enough, he also finds himself being targeted by another group of masked individuals, along with finding that the very same tall man that he saw stalking his friend Alex might have him in his sights. Marble Hornets ran for 5 years before seeing its conclusion, and I'm not sure how accurate this might be, but they say the entire series was all filmed on the same cheap little camera, and that it saw its fair share of abuse, working just fine all the way up to the bitter end until the final scene was filmed. Poetic, isn't it? Now with that in mind, the story itself is more of an outlier in the Slenderverse because it's just not part of it. There's no connection to any of the other series and it stands on its own. Despite that, many of its ideas inspired a lot of shared concepts between the other series. The Slender sickness, the disruptions and distortions from the cameras, the proxies that are ever so popular, and we'll get back to that.
It's Daniel.
You guys ready to Slender shoot?
Yeah, but where's the tie?
I left it in the car.
Where's the mask?
In the car.
What do you mean, man?
I left it in the car.
EverymanHYBRID began in 2010 and is arguably the biggest series in the Slenderverse. Not just because of the popularity, but the sheer scope of the project. This series not only covered multiple media platforms, be it YouTube, Tumblr, Twitter, and many more sites to come, but it also was absolutely massive in terms of being a game. The story began quite simply, as an exercise channel of all things. A group of friends working together to spread nutrition knowledge, exercise routines, and ways to live a healthier life. The presentation was just on the line of amateur to feel genuinely friendly and inviting. You can feel that natural charisma that can only come from people that have been friends together for years. Overall, the channel is very innocent and fun, although the background hints at something more sinister. At times, there's something lurking in the back. A tall, faceless man in a suit. Though it turns out they were just joking. It was just a friend wearing a suit and a mask. They made a video about it, admitting it's a gaffe after someone took the joke a bit too far and broke into their house. If only it was just a joke that went too far. They try to make things go back to normal, but videos started appearing on their channels that seemed all too personal. things they wouldn't want others to see, with strange titles. Despite that, the hybrids, as the group are called, say they can't see them. A fan compiles all these mysterious videos together on a disc, but viewing it sends the group into a trance-like state that knocks them out. Then comes the possession from an enigmatic spirit, and the appearance of the Rake. If only Slenderman was their biggest worry. Everyman Hybrid really lives up to its name as being a hybrid. It's not just a Slenderman story, it takes aspects of many different internet horrors. As mentioned before, there's the Slenderman, the Rake, a unique to the series entity known as Habit. It even sprinkles some Candle Cove in there, some reincarnation aspects, House of Leaves, and it's all wrapped up in one big story based on the morality play Everyman. Sounds kinda wild, does it not? Hope you're well read enough to understand everything. Even if you are and miss the nuances, it's still a fully enjoyable story. The series, however, is massive. While the important part is spread over the main channel, almost every character has their own Twitter, some even have their own YouTube pages, blogs, and that's not including the ARG aspect to it. If that's not enough, the mentioned Habit hosted a tournament with hundreds of players that played a rather big part in the story. Like I said, absolutely gargantuan for a series. You'd expect something of this size, scale, and presentation to be filled up with plenty of loose ends that end up dead in the water, like many Slender series. However, to my surprise, not only did it get a proper ending, it tied nearly everything into a neat little bow. So don't be afraid to go diving into this one. Just don't be afraid to use the wiki if you get a bit lost.
At this time, feel free to use your cell phone.
Man, this one stings already. So, TribeTwelve started in 2010. It's the last entry in what's considered to be the big three when it comes to the Slender series. While Marble Hornets was best in terms of story and EverymanHYBRID was top of its class for its sheer scale, TribeTwelve was the one that took its place as the best in terms of visuals. With a unique style and flair, it was the most visually pleasing to watch and had a pretty unique story. So let's talk about that for a bit. The story starts when Noah's cousin passes away. The series starts as a tribute, uploading videos of the last time Noah and Mila got to hang out together. As he watched, Noah couldn't help but notice Mila was acting quite strange. Upon closer inspection, Noah begins to notice that he and Mila were being followed by a man. A rather tall man. A rather tall man with no face. Wonder if that sounds familiar yet. It doesn't take long for strange things to start happening to him. First, small things like packages being left around. Then there's mysterious callers, strange letters, and a hack channel. While everything starts out as something worrying, it never quite hits supernatural for quite a while into the story. Honestly, the series isn't just interesting because of the visuals though. It also had one of the more interesting main characters, a very foul-mouthed, impulsive, headstrong anti-hero of a protagonist. It says something when their most defining trait is said as defiance. I mean, hell, how many other people do you know who straight up tried to shoot the Slender Man? How's that for some defiance? It didn't work, but you know. Though you may notice I'm talking about the series in a past tense. Unfortunately, the series has been informally cancelled. Not out of a lack of time for it to be finished or a failure of passion. More of a failure of morality, but we'll cover that another time, another place. Somewhere far darker, far, far colder. You know the series isn't gonna end, and we can only speculate about how it would have ended.
Where's Sean?
You need to listen to me, okay?
Why are we here?
You need to calm down. I need you on my side for this. I don't know where Sean is.
You don't know where Sean is?
No, Eric, but there's a reason I brought you here. Come,
You don't know where Sean is?
Eric, don't.
Then why are we here?
We're here because I need to show you something. That's not right. That's not right. That's not right.
ML Anderson 0. Where to start with this one? It's definitely unique, even among Slender series. It started in 2011 with a man named Michael talking to his cameras. He was recently let out of the hospital. It's not mentioned what he was in for, but it's pretty clear that he was likely in a mental health facility. Throughout the first few videos, it's mostly just Michael giving updates on his condition, as his doctor instructed him, talking about his lack of sleep, and when he does sleep, it's nightmares. Nightmares about being alone with a recurring object. A tall, grandfather clock that sits in an alleyway, with no numbers, no face. Not only was he there was another him. The series doesn't just start out with the tall, scary man in a suit that happens to be stalking from a distance. While Slender Man does eventually show up, and quite prominently, the series doesn't make too heavy use of him. Honestly, it's probably the most dramatic in the Slender universe. By that I mean, like, actual drama. The writing in this is stellar. This entry is a bit shorter than others, but not because I can't explain it, it's more that I just want people to watch it for themselves. The channel is very story heavy, with interesting characters and emotional drama. Whoever wrote this knew damn well what they were doing. But I can only praise it so hard, so please, go ahead, give it a watch yourself. On a little side note, I just wanted to point out a little fun they had with the title. M.L. Anderson. That's a big ol' anagram for Slender Man. And even into the 0. A little head without a face. Ain't that just cheeky?
Alrighty then. No! Damn it!
Now this one isn't an entry about a specific series. This one instead covers a common theme in the Slenderman mythos. Or maybe the better term is power? Either way you want to word it. It's a pretty common occurrence showing up in many stories and tellings. That being the presence of proxies. For those not in the know, a proxy is a person that works directly for the Slenderman. Be it through brainwashing or willing, Slenderman typically is shown as having an influence over certain people. These people have been dubbed proxies, and they quickly became a staple to the genre, where many stories were written solely about people becoming one. That, and many of the early Slender series had them as a side threat, to keep things more interesting than just having a tall, spooky man running around. In an interesting twist, the series that seems to have popularized the idea of proxies was Marble Hornets, through the characters Masky and Hoodie, which is notable, as these characters have never been explicitly shown to work for the Slenderman. In fact, they're working very much against him, as they try to resist his influences, and have been shown working against the one person that seems to be actively working for him, Alex. Even then, Alex doesn't quite fit the bill. While he's the most heavily associated as working with the creature, he's doing everything he can to stop the spread of it and its influence. The first series to properly codify proxies was TribeTwelve, showing a group that not only worked directly for the Slenderman, but also showing to be actively empowered by him. The confusion likely starts due to the hazy circumstance from early Marble Hornets, when alliances were entirely uncertain, and a prominent character seemed to change allegiance when exposed to him. In that case though, it's less the character being under the control, and more having grown violent towards anybody but himself during a heavy bout of Slender sickness. Which brings us to...
Well, we need to get out of here right now then, if he's been following us.
Come on, go up here and we'll see. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Now this is an interesting one. I don't actually know what's the first series to have codified this. It may have been Marble Hornets, as it's quite prevalent there, but I'm not entirely sure. It could have been part of the old lore, but Slender sickness is an occurrence that's quite common in earlier videos. The best way to put it is that exposure to the Slenderman doesn't just carry the usual psychological distress that intense fear causes, but also comes with a variety of physical effects. Symptoms of being exposed to Slenderman may include, but not limited to, anxiety, confusion, nausea, weak muscles, shivering, soreness, vomiting, migraines, amnesia, stroke, and death. Please consult your primary physician before starting Slender exposure. Please stop exposing yourself to the Slenderman if you have unusual mood swings, thoughts of suicide, loss of identity, and manic episodes. Talk to your doctor before starting treatment. Jokes aside, it's a common occurrence in many series, and the severity seems to change with each person that experiences it. Much like the Slenderman himself, the physical effects of being around him tend to vary too much to give a full explanation of exactly what it does to people. Personally, my favorite theory is the sickness comes not only from being mentally difficult to comprehend, but that he's effectively radioactive, in the sense that just being in his presence is enough to have adverse effects on your body. Of course, there's not just the adverse effects on your body, but also on items, which leads us to...
That may be interesting to you. Yeah.
Now, while Slender sickness is hard to pin down on what codified it, distortion can be tracked straight to Marble Hornets starting the trend, with most of the other series following suit. More simply put, Slenderman and cameras don't mix, the heavy video and audio distortions being the result of his presence around them. In most cases, he doesn't even need to be in view or earshot. His presence at all is enough to cause errors. But like all things, especially in relation to the Slenderman, it varies. The general consensus, however, is that it's not his presence in the frame causing distortion, but his proximity to it. Typically when he's far away, the camera can pick him up just fine, but the closer he comes, the more intense and disruptive the distortion gets. As said before, Marble Hornets codified this. There are instances of being visible in the distance, and those have no problem. But the moment that distance gets closed, the camera takes personal issue, almost heralding his appearance before he's even been noticed. Distortions are not limited to camera. Audio devices, unnervingly even ordinary photographs, are disrupted by his presence. It's almost like his existence in and of itself is such an abnormality that he's incapable of being recorded accurately. At least that's what they say.
So here we go with this one. As much as I kinda hate to say it, this is probably the most popular entry in the list. While I will admit to a bit of bias against this, I'm still gonna inform you anyways. This game came out in June of 2012 in the form of a beta. At the time, it was only known as Slender. It spread far and wide across the internet like a wildfire. Honestly, it was probably one of the first games to spread in such a way, through Let's Players jumping on and making overreacting videos. Hell, it might be the first, discarding, the obvious. This game was developed by Mark J. Hadley and made in Unity, and eventually was redubbed as Slender, the 8 pages. The game came with a few different modes, though it was mostly just changing aesthetics from night to day, and a mode that was a bit of a meme that got removed later. So what is the plot of the game? You're in the woods, for some reason, and you collected pages, for some reason. And the Slender Man is chasing you, for some reason. The more pages you collect, the more aggressive his approach becomes, and you lose by getting caught, which can happen to you by either staring at him for too long, getting grabbed from behind, or just by him teleporting in front of you to instant-kill you, because game design is hard. But that's pretty much it for the beta. Despite the overwhelmingly simple premise, this game caught on quite hard. As said, it spread through a bunch of Let's Players playing the game, and inspired an absolute metric fuckload of copycats that were made of the general theme of collect 8x while the Slender Man chases after you. In 2013, however, a more complete version of the game was released under the name of Slender: The Arrival, published by Parsec Productions. This time it has an actual story where you play as a woman named Lauren and search for her missing friend Kate. Soon enough, you find that her disappearance is linked to the Slender Man, though that's all I can really tell you about the narrative, as it's a rather short game, so thinking too much about it is going to spoil the story. I will say The Arrival does nail the visuals and atmosphere. The game honestly looks pretty great, and while I'm avoiding going into too much detail to not spoil the story, it does have these 3 names attached to it. That's right, we got the Marble Hornets boys in this project. So it's got at least some kind of coherency to it, unlike the blank slate of the beta. There's not much more to detail here though. Like I said, it's really simple in concept, and frankly I'm not that big of a fan of it myself, but I'll save my ire for a more complete video about horror games.
Why isn't he talking?
What do you want?
So this is a little bit of an off-the-cuff bonus entry that I'm going to throw in. I know I said I don't want to talk about subjects that I can't really explain too well, but it just didn't feel right leaving off one of the big five. Yes, my friends, there's not just the big three with Marble Hornets, EverymanHYBRID, and TribeTwelve, but two more series raised themselves to being in the upper echelon. That being ML Anderson Zero, as we covered, and Dark Harvest. But the issue is I genuinely can't really talk about Dark Harvest that much. I don't know why, despite being one of the biggest series, it just never clicked with me. But I just wanted to throw it in as an honorable mention and at least give a little bit of detail on it. Dark Harvest is a Slenderverse series about two friends named Christopher and Alex, as they investigate a cult called the Order. The Order worships an Egyptian god named Hotep. Gore is, of course, this series' take on Slenderman. Throughout the series, a web of family ties and connections to the Order from secondary protagonists reveal themselves, as Chris and Alex pursue knowledge of what led to them being stalked by the cult. While I personally can't give my own take on it, I still advise you to go and check it out yourself. After all, it became one of the big five for a reason, so clearly there's some kind of quality to it. It seems that we've climbed far enough down that we're touching water. We've talked about the prominent things that most people can recognize from a passing glance. It's almost comforting, talking about the things we know personally, even if that thing is a faceless monster man. Though, for the next part, we need to go under the surface. Lower, farther, colder. Once we break the surface, there's no going back up. The only way is down, down, down. At least until we touch the bottom. If you've liked what you've seen so far, come and join our little community. There's a link to the Discord in the description, where you get to cozy up with others. I encourage you to come in, make friends, feel safe as we plunge farther and farther into the fathoms, together. Now that we've reached the end of the first part, I'd like to give special thanks to a few certain people. The first two are Squeaks to Corgi and Chess Anarchy, as they are the two providing additional voices. The next I want to thank is Fizzy Swizzy, the person who designed the new stills for the channel. I'll be linking their social media and channels in the description for anybody that wants to check out their work. And one more big thank you for the people supporting me on Patreon. Their names are going to be on the screen now. Until next time, we have been the voices in your headphones. Remember to take your meds. Stay safe. Stay surreal. The Order worships an Egyptian god named Hotep. Gore is of course. Gore is of course. Fucking hell, I can't speak. This name has fucked me. Gore is a curse. I can't fucking. Gore is, of course, this Slender's fucking shit. Gore is, of course, this series' take on Slenderman.